The cameras at Roland Garros are programmed to track the ball. Every serve, every volley, every drop shot skimming the clay. That is their only job. But on a Tuesday afternoon in Paris, on the most famous tennis court in the world, something pulled those cameras away from the ball, and what they captured instead would be seen by over 80 million people before the week was over. Not a match-winning shot. Not a controversial call. Not a champion lifting a trophy. What stopped an entire stadium cold, what made the commentators lose their words mid-sentence, what the WD still hasn't fully explained, was a 20-year-old girl lying face down on the red clay, completely still, while 15,000 people held their breath and prayed she would move. Her name is Eala. And this is the story of the day the French Open stopped being about tennis. You need to understand something before we go any further. The French Open is not just a tournament. Roland Garros is the sport's most emotional arena. It is a place where legends are built and broken in the same afternoon, where the weight of history presses down on every player the moment they step through the gates. The clay is heavier than grass, slower than hard court, more unforgiving than either. It demands everything from an athlete: footwork, stamina, mental composure, and something that cannot be measured in rankings or statistics. It demands heart. And on May 26, 2026, in the second round of the most prestigious clay court tournament on the planet, the cameras would find out exactly how much heart a 20-year-old Filipina had left. The match on paper looked straightforward. Eala, ranked well outside the top 30, stepping onto court Philippe Chatrier to face Iva Jovic, 17 seed, 18 years old, the player the American tennis media had already decided was the next great thing. Jovic had power. She had precision. She had a serve that had dismantled players far more experienced than Eala, and she had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from being told since childhood that you were different from everyone else. Most importantly, Eala and Jovic had history. They had been doubles partners. They knew each other's games at the level of muscle memory. The expectation inside the stadium, and across every major broadcast, was that this would be clinical, professional, efficient. Jovic in straight sets. Eala had not read those expectations, and she had no intention of following them. But here is what nobody in that stadium knew as the match began. What nobody watching at home understood. And what the footage would only reveal hours later when the cameras went back and replayed every frame in slow motion. Eala had walked onto that court already hurting. The ankle that had collapsed under her in Rome, at the Foro Italico, 6 weeks before this moment, had never fully healed. She had worked through the pain in practice. She had taped it, iced it, pushed through it every single morning with the kind of quiet determination that doesn't make headlines until it does. Her coaching team knew. Her mother knew. The medical staff knew. The question was never whether the ankle would hold. The question was how long it would hold, and whether she could win before it didn't. The first set answered at least one question. Eala's left-handed spin, the signature weapon she had spent years crafting into something truly dangerous, was disrupting Jovic's rhythm at the root. Every return came back at an angle Jovic didn't expect. Every rally shifted direction one beat too early. The Filipino fans packed into Chatrier had turned the stadium into something extraordinary. Flags waving in synchronized waves. The chant of Laban Alex, fight Alex, bouncing off walls that had heard the greatest players in history. Eala took the first set 7-5. Not lucky. Not stolen. Earned point by point against a player who had been favored to win this tournament. What happens next changed everything. The second set was suffocating. Both players held serve through game after game, neither willing to gift a single point. The tension in the stadium became physical. You could feel it in the silence between points, in the way the crowd exhaled as one organism every time a rally ended. Into the seventh game of the second set, tied at 3-3, Jovic dropped a shot short and wide. Eala sprinted for it. She reached it, she barely reached it, and flicked the ball back over the net with the edge of her racket in a moment that should have been impossible. The ball landed in. The crowd erupted. And then the crowd went completely silent. Because Eala had not gotten up. She was face down on the clay. Her arms folded beneath her. Her face hidden. her shoulders moving in a way that every person in that stadium, every person watching on television, recognized immediately. She was crying. Not from the shot. Not from exhaustion. The ankle had given way on the sprint. And in that moment, 15,000 people watching, the cameras finding her in close-up, the broadcasters going quiet, the match stopped being a tennis match. It became something far more human. The medical team crossed the court at a sprint. The tournament supervisor appeared. Eala's coaches rose from their seats at the baseline, their faces controlled in the way of people who are trained not to show panic but cannot quite manage it. The stadium, which had been a wall of noise seconds earlier, went completely, absolutely still. The Philippine flags stopped waving. The chants faded. Even Jovic, standing at the other end of the court, moved toward the net, her face open with something that looked like genuine concern for the person she was competing against. And here is what the cameras did next. What produced the moment that would travel farther and faster than any tennis shot ever could. While the medical staff attended to Eala on the clay, the camera operators did what they are trained to do. They scanned the stands for reaction. They found Riza, Eala's mother, her hands pressed together, her lips moving in silent prayer. They found the coaching staff, stricken. They found Cristiano Ronaldo in the royal box, leaning forward with his hands clasped, his expression unreadable in the way of someone watching something that matters to them. And then, in the front row of the players' box, seated directly beside Eala's mother, the cameras found a young woman that nobody recognized. Not a celebrity. Not a journalist. Not a player or a coach or an official. Just a woman, crying in a way that had nothing polite or restrained about it. Raw, uncontrolled tears. Both hands clutching a Philippine flag to her chest, knuckles white, shoulders shaking. The camera stayed on her. For a moment that felt much longer than it was. Within minutes, social media fractured into a single question. Who was she? The answer, when it came, was so simple and so devastating that it stopped people mid-scroll. Her name was Grace. She was a nurse from Manila. She had been living and working in Paris for 11 years. 11 years of double shifts. 11 years of skipping meals, skipping vacations, sending money home, building a life in a country that was never quite hers. And for months before this tournament, she had been saving. Not for new clothes. Not for a trip. Not for anything except a single ticket to Roland Garros. She had scrimped and sacrificed and worked extra hours until she had enough. Because she needed to see Alex Eala in person. Not on a phone screen. Not in a highlights reel. With her own eyes, at full size, on the biggest clay court in the world, fighting for something that felt, to Grace, in a way she could not fully explain, like it belonged to all of them. I wanted to wave our flag, Grace would tell a reporter later that evening, still in her matchday clothes, her eyes red. I wanted to chant her name. I wanted to feel, for one moment, like I was home. When Eala fell to the clay, Grace thought it was over. She thought the months of sacrifice had produced nothing but heartbreak. And the tears came before she could stop them, not because of a tennis match, but because of everything she had poured into this moment and everything she was afraid she was about to watch dissolve in the Parisian afternoon. But then something happened that neither Grace nor anyone else in that stadium was prepared for. Eala pushed herself up. Slowly. Deliberately. With the kind of controlled movement that tells you the pain is significant but the decision has already been made. She tested the ankle, weight on it, then more weight. She took a breath so deep you could see it from the stands. And then she looked up. Not at her coaches. Not at the medical staff. She looked at the stands. At the section where her mother was standing. Where Grace was standing. Where thousands of people who had traveled across continents and oceans had gathered to watch this exact woman play tennis on this exact court. And Alex Eala walked back to the baseline. The stadium did not erupt. It rose. Slowly, like something gathering weight and warmth, the crowd came to its feet. Not in celebration of a winner, in recognition of something they had just witnessed. The kind of fight that lives below statistics and rankings and tournament brackets. The kind of fight that makes strangers cry in stadium seats and nurses save their meal money for months. The kind of fight that has nothing to do with tennis and everything to do with being human. And Grace, the nurse from Manila, watched through tears that had shifted completely in character. "That's our Alex," she said, without knowing the camera was on her. "That's our fighter." The world heard those words, and the Eala effect took on a meaning it had never quite had before. Now, here is where you have to pay attention, because what happened after Eala returned to the baseline is the part of this story that most people did not fully understand while they were watching it. The ankle was still injured. She was still hurting. The second set was still tied at 3-3, and Jovic, younger, uninjured, and absolutely not going to hand this match to anyone, had not softened. If anything, she had sharpened. She had watched her opponent fall and rise, and she understood, perhaps better than anyone in the stadium, that the version of Eala standing at that baseline right now was more dangerous than the one before the injury. Because she had nothing left to protect. Jovic served. Eala returned. A rally began. Not a short one. Not a comfortable one. 10 shots. 12. 14. The crowd counted silently with each exchange, the flags beginning to move again, hesitantly at first, then with the confidence of people who have started to believe again. Eala slid into a backhand, recovered before she'd finished the slide, sprinted to the net and retreated to the baseline in a sequence of movement that should not have been possible on a compromised ankle. But the ankle held. Point by point, it held. At the 15th shot, Jovic's forehand sailed long. 15-love. Eala pumped her fist, not toward Jovic, not toward the umpire, directly at the stands. At the flags. At her mother. At Grace. It was not the gesture of a player celebrating a point. It was the gesture of someone sending a message that this is not over, this has not been over, this will not be over. What nobody expected was what came next. The following game lasted 22 shots. 22. Eala moved Jovic side to side with a patience that seemed almost inhuman given what her body had just been through, stretching the American wider and wider until the court opened. When the short ball came, floating off Jovic's racket like an invitation, Eala stepped in and hit a forehand down the line with everything she had. The ball landed flush on the baseline. Jovic, one of the fastest young players on tour, didn't reach it. 30. The crowd noise crossed a threshold. It was no longer spectators reacting to tennis. It was something closer to a collective prayer being answered in real time. At 40-love, 3 break points, the stadium was physically shaking. The chant of Laban, Alex had become deafening, not just from the Filipino sections but from every corner of Chatrier, from people who had arrived not knowing her name and were now shouting it with their full voices. Eala looked at the royal box. She looked at the stands. She looked very briefly at her own ankle, still wrapped, still throbbing, still a reminder of exactly how much this was costing her. Then she bounced the ball at the baseline. Twice. 3 times. And she served. The rally was short, sharp, and decisive. Eala's forehand found the corner. Jovic's backhand found the net. The stadium did not just erupt, it transformed. Something shifted in the air of Court Philippe Chatrier in that moment that everyone present would later struggle to describe. Eala walked back to her chair. She didn't raise the racket. She didn't fall to her knees. She sat down, looked at the stands where her mother was standing, and smiled. Not a performance. Not for the cameras. A real smile. The kind that comes from somewhere far below the scoreboard. Her mother was crying. Grace was crying. Thousands of people were crying. Alex Eala was smiling. But the match was not done. And what happened next is the part of this story that no highlight reel can fully capture, because it wasn't one moment. It was a sequence of moments, each one stacking on the last, each one demanding more from Eala's body and spirit than the one before it. The second set slipped into a tiebreak. Jovic had fought back. She had refused every attempt to close the door. At 6 games apiece, the deciding moments would be played in a tiebreak where every point carried the full weight of everything that had come before it. 5-5 in the tiebreak. Jovic had already saved 2 match points. 2 moments when Eala had been 1 point from victory and Jovic had reached into herself and found something that refused to accept defeat. This is the part of elite sport that doesn't translate in summaries, the sheer psychological cost of being 1 point away from winning and watching it slip, then doing it again, then doing it a third time. The crowd was past noise and into something else entirely. The flags were waving so hard they were blurring. The chants had stopped being organized and become a single sustained sound. 6-5. Match point again. Eala walked to the baseline. She bounced the ball. She looked at her mother pressing her hands together in prayer. She looked at the royal box, where Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most famous athletes on the planet, a man who has competed in finals that changed careers, was leaning forward with his hands clasped like he was also praying. She looked at Grace, the nurse from Manila, clutching her Philippine flag in both hands like it was the only solid thing in the world. She tossed the ball into the Parisian sky. The serve landed near the line, not an ace, but close enough that Jovic's return came back weak, floating high and slow into the middle of the court. Eala tracked it. She positioned herself under it with the same deliberate calm she had shown every point since she stood up from that clay. She swung. The forehand screamed into open space. Jovic moved. She didn't reach it. She didn't need to reach it. The point was already over before the ball bounced. Game, set, match, Alex Eala. The racket hit the clay. Both hands covered her face. The shoulders, the same shoulders that had been shaking on the court 30 minutes earlier, the shoulders that had carried the weight of her nation's hope through an injury that had every reason to end this story, shook again. But this time for a completely different reason. The tears that she had refused to cry through the pain, through the weight of 15,000 eyes, through every single point of that tiebreak. They came now. All at once. Her mother ran onto the court. Her coaches followed. The Philippine flags moved in every section of the stadium. The chant of Laban Alex, which had begun as encouragement and become something closer to a war cry, echoed through Roland Garros and refused to fade. And in the royal box, Cristiano Ronaldo rose to his feet and applauded. Not politely. With the kind of genuine appreciation that people who understand what athletic sacrifice costs give to someone they recognize has paid it in full. The cameras captured every frame, every tear, every flag, every face in that stadium that was doing something it hadn't planned to do today, feeling something it hadn't planned to feel. The footage of Grace, the nurse from Manila, crying and then rising, clutching her flag and shouting those 4 words, "That's our Alex, that's our fighter," was played more than 80 million times inside the first week. 80 million. On a second-round match at a tennis tournament. Think about what that number means. Not because of the tennis, because of the story inside the tennis. Because of what people saw in those images that went beyond winners and losers and ranking points. They saw themselves. They saw Grace saving for months to afford a single afternoon of belonging. They saw Riza pressing her hands together in prayer. They saw a 20-year-old who fell on clay in front of the world and chose, in front of the world, to get up. And in all of it, they saw something they wanted to be true about human beings. That heart is real. That sacrifice matters. That sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes, the person who refuses to quit is the one who gets to win. That night, in her hotel room, Eala sat with an ice pack wrapped around the ankle that had almost ended the story in the 7th game of the second set. Her phone was alive with messages from every corner of the world. Athletes, celebrities, strangers, people she had never met and would never meet, who had watched her fall and rise on a screen and felt something shift inside them. Her mother knocked on the door and came in. The room was quiet. The tournament was still happening outside. Other players, other matches, other stories being written on that red clay. But in this room, there were just 2 people who had been inside this journey from the very beginning. "You did it, Anik," her mother said. "We did it, Mama," Eala answered. "We did it together." 4 words. But every person who has ever carried a dream on behalf of someone who believed in them before they believed in themselves understood exactly what those 4 words meant and exactly who they included. Not just the 2 people in that room. Not just the coaching staff. Every Filipino in every section of that stadium. Grace, who had worked double shifts and skipped meals for a chance to wave her flag in Paris. Every person across the world who had watched this match on a phone screen in the middle of the night because their time zone put them there, and who had stayed awake anyway because they couldn't turn it off. Alex Eala advanced to the 3rd round of the French Open. Her ranking would climb. The matches ahead would bring their own challenges, higher-seeded opponents, more pressure, more clay, more points. The ankle would be iced and taped and pushed through again. There would be more mornings before dawn in the practice facility, more moments of doubt, more choices between protecting the body and honoring the dream. But here is the thing about the 2026 French Open that no one will remember in terms of statistics or bracket results. The defining image of this tournament, the image that will be printed and framed and shown to young Filipino athletes for the next generation, is not a trophy being raised. It is not a champion being crowned. It is Alex Eala on court, Philippe Chatrier, face down on the clay, completely still. And then it is Alex Eala pushing herself up. That is the image. That is the story. Not the victory. The decision to keep going when everything in the situation argued for stopping. Not the win, the refusal. Not the tennis, the fight. Because the Eala effect was never about winning. It was always about what happens when someone chooses not to quit in front of 15,000 people who are watching, in front of a world that is watching, in front of their mother who is praying, in front of a nurse from Manila who spent months of savings on a single afternoon to be in that stadium and feel like she was home. The effect isn't the result on the scoreboard. The effect is Grace's tears turning from fear to pride in the span of 90 seconds. The effect is 80 million people pressing play. The effect is every Filipino athlete who will walk onto a court or a field or a stage in the years to come and remember the woman who fell on the clay of Roland Garros in 2026 and chose, in front of the whole watching world, to stand back up. So here is the question that matters. The one that will outlast this tournament and this match and even this extraordinary season. When the next generation steps onto the world stage, inspired by the flags they saw waving in Paris, by the chants they heard bouncing off those famous walls, by the woman who could have stayed down and chose not to, will they remember what she won? Or will they remember what she refused to lose? Drop your answer in the comments. Because that question doesn't have one right answer. And the conversation it starts is exactly the kind that sport, at its very best, is supposed to create.